Let's quickly walk through some code that transforms our flattened schema into an expanded schema. The expand PMAX schema function will be our entry point. We'll have to pass in the validated schema, which I've named PMAX campaigns, as well as a Google Ads client and customer ID so that we can construct resource names. We'll ultimately return the expanded PMAX campaigns variable, which is initialized as an empty list. Also note the global nextTempID variable, which is what we'll use to track the temporary IDs that we'll use to construct resource names. To that end, we'll also make use of a nextTempID function to decrement the temporary ID. Here, you can see we create the campaign budget and campaign objects, which is as simple as assigning the fields from the old schema to the new one, with a few key differences. First, we'll create a resource name using the temporary ID, and then decrement nextTempID. In addition, we associate the campaign with the corresponding campaign budget by using the budget's temporary resource name. We'll also expand our conversion goals, but all we have to do here is add a reference to our campaign. Things get a little more interesting when we look at asset groups. For each asset group, rather than just assigning the entire object like we did for our campaign budget and our campaign, we're going to explicitly declare which fields we want to assign to our expanded asset group, because we don't want all of the fields. We'll set the asset group temporary resource name, the campaign reference, and the status. Then we'll decrement TempID. Next, we're going to expand our asset group info object into two separate lists. We have a list of new assets we want to create as part of the request, and then we also have a list of asset group assets. This expand asset group info method will return a dictionary with our list of new assets to create and asset group assets. Let's go ahead and flip to that method. First, if there is no asset group info object, we'll return a dictionary with empty lists of assets and asset group assets. Otherwise, we'll iterate through the list of strings for each field type inside of our asset group info entry. And for each one, if the string is a resource name, we know the asset has already been created. Otherwise, we'll need to create the asset, which we'll do as part of our bulk mutate request. So we'll create a dictionary with the fields we'll need to do that. A name for the asset, which is required, an asset temporary resource name, and the asset text or image URL, depending on the asset type. We'll append our asset to the list of assets and decrement nextTempID. Now, regardless of whether or not the asset already exists in our Google Ads account, we'll add an asset group asset to the corresponding dictionary for each asset. This entry will contain our asset group reference and our asset reference, which will either be the original asset string if it was a resource name, meaning the asset is already created in the Google Ads account. If not, we'll use the resource name we created with the temporary ID. We also have to set the asset field type for each asset group asset. I've decided to use a little helper method here rather than the approach I've used to handle other enums thus far. The field names I use don't exactly match the asset field types, and we also need to assign short headlines and short descriptions to their actual enum types, headlines and descriptions. Once we're done iterating, we return our dictionary. Finally, we'll add our asset group signals to the asset group object. This is pretty straightforward. We'll return an empty list if there are no signals on the original schema. Otherwise, we'll loop through each list item in each field of the signals object, associate the signal with the corresponding asset group using its temporary resource name, then either the audience or search theme field depending on the type of signal.